Right, so chapter 37. Last time Buster obviously fell asleep. I'm not sure whether that's because the book was boring, my voice is boring, whether he was just very relaxed. But chapter 37 is quite a long one, so I reckon he'll probably do the same. Marcus is here to say sorry, Detective Inspector Pierce said. He was too frightened to come forward earlier. He thought he'd get into trouble. Now he's told us what he knows. I have here the statement he made earlier, and his story starts out just as Ted worked it out. She nodded at Kat. With Kat's help, I understand. My help? Said Kat. I'd never have worked it out without you, Kat, I said. Detective Inspector Pierce continued. Marcus's mum is outside in a squad car with another officer waiting. She wanted you to hear his story too. When he's done, we'll take them both home. But I don't understand. Rashid squeezed his knuckles into his head. Marcus and Salim spent several hours together the day Salim disappeared. Inspector Pierce explained. Didn't you, Marcus? Marcus nodded. By arrangement. Then Marcus went back to Manchester on his own. Salim didn't go, but he was supposed to, wasn't he, Marcus? Marcus nodded again. You see, Salim had planned to run away. No, Aunt Gloria moaned, putting her head in her hands. But he didn't. Not in the end. He changed his mind. Aunt Gloria looked up. He changed his mind, she said softly. She nodded. That's right. He changed his mind. Do you want to explain, Marcus? Detective Inspector Pierce asked. Or would you rather I read out your statement? There was a pause. Marcus put his hood back up so his face was hidden again. A voice you could hardly hear said, The statement, miss. So Detective Inspector Pierce read out Marcus's statement, and this is what it said. My name is Marcus Flood, and this is the truth. Salim is my best mate because he joined my school last September, and they called me names, but they don't since he's joined. My mum is from Bangladesh, and my dad's Irish, but that didn't stop Jason Smart grabbing my sandwiches every day and throwing them on the floor. Then Salim joined my class and sat next to me. They called him racist names too, but he didn't take any notice, even when Jason Smart grabbed his sandwiches and threw them on the floor, saying that they stank. The next day, Jason Smart opened his own sandwich box, and there were thousands of maggots heaving in it. The whole class was in fits. Salim went from being called racist names to Mosher Salim Supreme, and since I was his friend, we were moshers together. We had our shirts half tucked in, half out. We were the top moshers of Class 9K. When you're a mosher, you're not supposed to be keen. You'd sit at the back of the class and look dead bored. But with drama, it was different. We were mosher keeners because Mr. Davison was so cool. He chose us to star in the school play at Easter, The Tempest. Mr. Davison played Prospero. Salim was Ferdinand, and I was Miranda. The girl. My voice hadn't broken back then. I had a long dark wig to wear and a white dress, and every time I said I was certainly a maid, the whole class cheered and stamped their feet, and I'd roll my eyes, and everyone went, ooh la la. Mr. Davison said I was a comic genius. Then, after Easter, Salim came back to school with some bad news. His mum was moving to New York, and she was taking him with her. I was gutted. I sat in science and technology, thinking how I'd pinch some chemicals and swallow them whole, because I couldn't stand the thought of going back to being alone. Without Salim, that's what I'd be. Salim didn't want to go either. He asked his dad if he could go and live with him, but his dad said no. Then his mum booked the tickets. They were to fly out from London so that she and Salim could visit these relations they hadn't seen in years, called the Sparks. Salim didn't want to. I said at least he'd get to fly on the London Eye, which was something we'd always dreamed of doing together. But Salim said flying on it without me wouldn't be any fun. That's when we had a big idea. We'd meet up, me in my Miranda disguise, and ride the London Eye together. Then he'd take the disguise and vanish and together we'd run off, leaving his mum and the Sparks behind. We get on a train back to Manchester together later that day, and he'd hide out somewhere and I'd bring him food. And when his mum's flight had taken off to New York without him, he'd go and live with his dad, and his dad would have no choice but to say yes. Then he and I could go on being the top moshers of Class 9K. The first thing I did was ring Christy, my big brother. Christy's down in London, and he's always calling to ask for money, and Dad tells him he's not a bottomless pit and to get lost. This time I rang him. I said if he met me at the London Eye and helped me and my mate Salim carry out this joke we were planning, we'd give him a tenner. And he said yes. Salim went down to London with his mum on Sunday. The next day I told my mum I was off for the day with the Scouts, and she believed me and even gave me some money. Plus Salim had given me his savings, so I had more than enough to buy 2 London Eye tickets. Then I hopped on an early train to London and didn't pay a penny, because there's this trick I know to dodge the ticket collectors. I got off at Euston Station and found my way down to the river, and there was the Eye. You couldn't miss it. Christy showed up first. I put on a wig I'd worn as Miranda and these slick sunglasses I bought in the Costa del Sol last summer, plus a jacket I pinched from Sharon, my older sister. Christy roared his head off. Oh, we bought 2 tickets. I didn't tell him that Salim was going to run away and I was going to hide him. I said we were planning a joke on Salim's cousins, the Sparks. My voice had broken since being in the play. No way could I go up to these Spark cousins myself. You'd have spotted I was a girl the moment I opened my mouth. That's why we needed Christy. Plus, he was an adult, and nobody would ask any questions when we bought the tickets. We got the tickets. I called Salim to see where he was. Hurry up, I said. We're boarding at 11:30. He said he was just coming over the river, and minutes later he arrived. The mums went off for a coffee, just as we'd planned, and Salim and the 2 Spark cousins joined the ticket queue. Christy went over, pretending to be a stranger, although he'd met Salim once before. He gave Salim the ticket and showed him his place in the queue, and then he dashed off to work because he was running late. I nearly died laughing, pretending not to know Salim. I had to bite my cheek all the way to the ramp, and still Salim didn't look at me. Not until we were on the wheel itself. Then the capsule doors closed and we went up and we split our sides. It was magic, air and light and miles of London, all to ourselves. We were happy. Then when we got to the top, Salim went quiet. He was looking straight at the sun. Salim, I said, what are you staring at? Manhattan, he said. It's London, I said, not Manhattan. It's my fate, Marcus. I've got to face it. I was sad then. It sounded like he'd changed his mind about swapping identities, disappearing and coming back with me to Manchester to hide. But when everyone turned to get the photo taken, he laughed and took the wig off my head and stuck it on his. I took off the jacket. He put it on. I straightened the wig, popped on the sunglasses. It took seconds. Nobody saw us. They were all looking the other way for their souvenir shot. Then the pod landed. We walked out, right under the noses of the Spark cousins, and you should have seen their freaked out faces. Salim put on this fancy walk to act like a girl. Next he cruised past where his mum was sitting, having a coffee, and she looked straight at him and didn't recognise him. I dragged him off before she'd noticed me, and we disappeared into the crowd. He got out his mobile phone and turned it off. The day's ours, Marcus, he shouted. He thumped me on the back and took off the wig. He'd left his camera behind with one of the cousins, but between us we still had some money, so we bought a disposable camera at the chemist's and snapped one of me on the bridge. Then he bought hot dogs and Mars bars and cokes, and we picnicked in this park by the river, and I pretended to be a duck squawking, and Salim said I was a comical genius. Then we went to this square where all the buskers perform. They were dead funny. A juggler on stilts with a tear in his pants, a magician with a silver globe that rolled over his body, A clown that did 10 somersaults and landed on his nose. After the show, Salim gave the clown his last £1. We walked up Tottenham Court Road and found this shop that sells electric pianos. You could do organ, strings, trumpets and drum beats all at once. It was great. The best day I'd ever had. I wanted it to last forever, but it didn't. We got to Euston Station. That's when Salim told me he wasn't coming with me. I can't, Marcus, he said. You can. It's easy. You just hop on and hide in the toilets. It's not that. I can't run away. Not from my mum. She's some mum, my mum. But she's the only mum I've got. And it's not just her. It's their cousins. It's the cousins, Ted and Kat. The Sparks? I thought you said you couldn't care less about them. That was before I met them again. They're great, Ted and Kat. If I don't go back, they'll get in trouble for letting me go on the eye all by myself. And Mum will be frantic. I didn't know what to say. People rushed by, dashing for trains. Announcements droned on. I heard one for Manchester. My train. You're just a musher want to be, I said. Yeah, you're the real musher, Marcus. I'm not in your league. He smiled. You did the maggots, didn't you? How did you know? When I was round your house last, your dad told me about his hobby, fishing. Then he gave me back Shannon's pink fluffy jacket, and I put it in my backpack along with the wig. But I made him keep the sunglasses. They looked good on him. A whistle blew. It was my train. We said goodbye, and he hugged me. Run, Marcus. I'll send you a card from the Empire State Building. So I ran. Doors were slamming, and I heard him shout after me. Don't let them call you names anymore. You're a mosher, Marcus. Remember, you're a comic genius. A guard saw me and shouted. I jumped on the train. I had only just made it before they locked the doors. I saw Salim waving as the train pulled out. It was the last time I saw him. I hid in the toilet until after Stoke-on-Trent. At Manchester I got off without getting caught and went home. How was the Scouts? Mum asked. Fantastic, I said. Later that night, when I was sneaking Shannon's pink jacket back into her wardrobe, I found Salim's mobile phone in my pocket. He'd left it behind, just like he'd left his camera with the cousins. I'd mail it to him when he got to New York, I thought, and put it in my desk drawer. The next day the police came. They said Salim had gone missing. Mum was there. If I'd admitted to having been with Salim that day, the day before, she'd have been livid. So I stuck to the Scout story. But after the police left, I started worrying. Where was Salim? Why hadn't he gone back to the Sparks house, like he said? I tossed and turned all night. Then, today, I couldn't take it any more. I took out his phone, meaning to call his mum and tell her what I knew. So I did. I turned it on. There were about 20 voicemail messages waiting, all from her. She sounded terrible. I put through a call, but it rang and rang. Then she answered, and I realised I couldn't face talking to her. I hung up and switched the phone off again. I hid it under my mattress. Then later, Christy rang me on my mobile. He said Salim's cousins had bumped into him at his motorbike show where he's working. He hadn't given me away, but if I knew where Salim was, I'd better go straight to the police and leave him out of it. He shouted his head off. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go to the police. I'd get into trouble. Then tonight, the police showed up, and they knew everything. Salim's cousin Ted had worked it out, they said. They said how it had been with the wig and the eye and jumping on the train. It was like Ted Spark had been in my head, seeing my faults. And I remember Salim saying how he had some weird syndrome that made him think like a giant computer. So this is the truth and nothing but the truth. I last saw Salim at Euston train station. That's all I know. Marcus Flood. That's the end.